U.S. Marshal sitting on a horse. His hands are tied behind his back. There's a noose around his neck, attached to a tree branch right above his head. He's surrounded by all these outlaws that captured him, and they're getting ready to decide his fate. The leader of the gang leans into him and he says, "Any last words?" He doesn't respond. He just shakes his head no. And he leans in again. "What do you want on your tombstone?" And he raises his head. And he says, "Pepperoni and cheese." Some of you may remember this commercial from the 90s. I remember this very well because when you're a poor college kid living away from home for the first time, frozen pizzas are a really big part of the grocery budget. Actually, we may have starved if we didn't have these. I remember I actually saw this commercial the other day, and this time when I saw it, I realized that is a really good question. What do I want on my tombstone? And this time I'm not talking about pizza. What do I want on my tombstone? What would I want it to say? And I couldn't help but think of the old Jim Rohn quote. When you die, there's going to be 2 dates on your tombstone. The only thing that matters is what happens between them. Okay? So I'll rephrase the question. When you die, how do you want to be remembered? And right away when I said it, I realized I've answered this question before. 20 years ago, I answered this question. I've given a lot of speeches now in this group. I've gotten to know some of you really well. So I thought what would be fun today, I'm going to share with you an event that happened in my past that I think helped turn me into the person I am today. And it's probably the reason I do what I do today. So some of the crazy, insane stuff you hear me talk about when I come up here and speak, it'll probably all make more sense after you hear this story. The event I'm going to talk to you about happened 20 years ago. I'm just going to lead you in a little bit first. When I was a freshman in high school, I started wrestling. I never wrestled before. Right away I was hooked. Actually, you could say I was obsessed. Wrestling was life for me in high school. Nothing else really seemed to matter. I wasn't very good at first. When I was a freshman, I was a very scared, very shy, very timid kid. And just so you can really appreciate this, I have a picture of my freshman year wrestling picture, where you can see how scared and timid I look. If you look, you can see the fear in my eyes in this picture. It took me a while to figure it out. It took me a while to figure out wrestling. And I think the turning point for me happened the summer after my sophomore year in high school. I decided to go to Jay Robinson's intensive wrestling camp, going from the advice from my coach. This was basically a 10-day boot camp for wrestlers. Actually, it was 10 days of pure hell. And I looked up this camp, and these still are going strong today, 20 years later. So the flyer that you have is face down in front of you can look at. This is just stuff I copied and pasted from the website. The kid's face in the picture says it all. I'm just going to read to you the middle paragraph here. Since 1978, Jay Robinson and his staff have provided an unparalleled boot camp style training experience for thousands of wrestlers across the nation each summer. We coach a deeper understanding of the skills of discipline, sacrifice, dedication, hard work, responsibility, and accountability. And you'll be pushed to your limits, both physically and mentally. If you're the kind of person who takes the easy way out, who quits halfway through, or who doesn't like a challenge, this wrestling camp isn't for you. But if you're someone whose singular focus is to make yourself into a better person today than you were yesterday, you'll enjoy a challenging but rewarding experience whose lessons will last a lifetime. I didn't realize how much of an understatement that paragraph was until later. Right underneath this, there's a sample schedule of what we went through, which is pretty much the way I remember it. Wake up, work out, eat, work out, eat, work out, eat, work out, lights out. That's pretty much what it was for 10 days straight. This was a really hard 10 days. But you know what? It was worth it. You guys have heard me say in other speeches, you may remember the phrase, the bigger the challenge, the bigger the reward. I said that a few times. I don't think there's a better example of it than this camp. When I got back from this camp, not only did I become a good wrestler, but somehow I became a leader. I was the first kid in my high school to be voted team captain both my junior and senior year. And this was coming from the kid who was so shy as a freshman, I'd go through a whole wrestling practice without speaking some days. So I had a really good season, both my junior and senior year, good enough where I actually went and wrestled in college. So now here, this is my freshman year in college. You might see just a little bit of a change from the first picture of this one. So I actually wrestled for 3 years in college. I ended up being a high school wrestling coach. I started a wrestling program, and I ended up having a pretty good wrestling career. Actually, last year, I was in my high school inducted me into the Burlington High School Wrestling Hall of Fame. And so it was a great honor. So I ended up having a really good wrestling career. And no doubt it all started with this camp. That was definitely the turning point for me. I know the boot camp style environment and the hard workouts that the camp gave, that made a big impact on me. But I think the actual biggest impact I got from this experience was a speech I heard while I was at camp. On one of the last days of camp, we had a guest speaker by the name of Bob Steenledge. This is his book. You can tell it's really worn. I've read it 100 times, and that says a lot because I'm someone who doesn't read a book all the way through. If any of you can relate to that. This Bob Steenledge story was incredible. It was a very inspiring story. He had a very hard life growing up. His family was really poor. His dad was an abusive alcoholic. He was a really skinny kid, and he was bullied every day growing up. As a 7th grader, he fell in love with wrestling. And he decided as a 7th grader that he was going to be the first 4-time state champion in high school in Iowa, which is something that back then seemed impossible. Everyone said it was impossible because wrestling was so tough in Iowa. But despite all the odds against him and tons of adversity throughout the 4 years, he did it. He became the first 4-time state champion in Iowa. His whole story is incredible. This guy has faced so much adversity. Everything you can think go wrong to a person went wrong to this guy, and he came out a winner every time. He was such a good speaker. His whole story, his whole message was about never giving up. He spoke to us for probably an hour, and it seemed like he spoke for 20 minutes because it was just such a good speech. I remember when I was there and I saw him that night, I remember thinking, when I'm older, I want to motivate people the same way this guy has motivated me. He made you think. And at the end of his speech, he asked us a question. I'm going to ask you guys now. And I'll never forget this question. When you die, how do you want to be remembered? List 3 ways that people will describe you. I can't find my journal from this book. It's been 20 years. I'm hoping it'll turn up someday. But I remember my answers like I said it yesterday. The first thing I said was, I wanted people to say that I never back down. And I never back down from a challenge, and that when things get tough, I never give up. And the second one was that I wanted people to say I was really helpful, that they can always count on me for help when they needed me. And the third one was I wanted people to say that I was very inspiring. That I could always inspire them to work harder and to do more. 20 years ago, I still remember those answers. I'm going to add a follow-up question to his question today. And I'm going to start asking myself this on a regular basis going forward. And that's, am I living my life in a way that will help me be remembered for the things I want to be remembered for? Do me a favor. Take some time this weekend and answer these 2 questions yourself. And hopefully they'll have the same impact on you as they had on me. Thanks.